Before we start, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our new stories. Now, enjoy. The evening air carried the scent of roasted yam and wood smoke as people hurried home from the fields. In a small village in Nigeria, a man named Obinna walked back slowly, his steps heavy though his hands carried nothing. He was known as a quiet man, the kind who weighed his words before speaking, and today his silence felt heavier than ever. His wife, Adiz, was inside their compound, pacing. She had fire in her eyes, the kind of fire that can burn even those closest. Obinna's mother, Mema Efima, was an old woman with a gentle but sharp tongue. She had lived long enough to see her son grow from a timid boy into a man, and she believed she knew what was best for him. That belief was the seed of endless quarrels. On this day, the quarrel grew into something no one expected. Adiz had been sweeping when Mema Efima corrected her, saying she was not keeping the compound clean enough. The words were simple, but the tone was sharp, cutting deeper than a blade. Adiz dropped the broom, her voice rising, telling Mema Efima that she was no longer the one to rule this household. Mema Efima, never the kind to shrink back, threw her own words like stones. Neighbors heard the clash of voices, rising, overlapping, twisting like two rivers fighting for the same path. Then, as if words were not enough, Adiz's anger spilled over. She pushed Mema Efima. The old woman stumbled. Shocked gasps echoed from the doorway, where a few women stood frozen. But Adiz was not done. Her hands struck the old woman, blows falling like heavy rain. Mema Efima cried out, not just from the pain but from disbelief. How could her son's wife lay hands on her? By the time Obinna entered, the compound was chaos. Dust rose from the ground, neighbors whispering and holding each other back, unsure whether to intervene. Mema Efima was on the floor, her wrapper untied at one end, her face streaked with tears. Adiz stood above her, chest heaving, fists trembling, eyes daring anyone to come closer. Obinna's heart thundered. His body shook as though lightning had passed through him. He looked at his mother, then at his wife, then back at the crowd pressing closer to the gate. Shame clawed at his skin. Everyone was watching. Everyone would talk. But louder than their whispers was the sound of his mother's sobs, weak and broken. Adiz turned to Obinna, her voice sharp, saying, "Your mother disrespects me in this house. She treats me like a servant. Today, I showed her I am not one." The words struck Obinna like poison. His eyes burned, not with tears but with something darker. He wanted to speak, to shout, to silence both the voices outside and the storm inside him, but the words caught in his throat. The neighbors drew closer, eager, hungry for what would happen next. A man torn between blood and marriage, love and loyalty. His silence was louder than any thunder. And in that silence, the night carried a weight none of them would forget. Obinna finally walked toward his mother, lifting her slowly, his hands trembling as he held her. The crowd hushed, waiting, their eyes following every move. Adiz stood firm, her chin raised, daring him to take a side. The story was only beginning, but already the air felt charged, as if the gods themselves leaned closer to see what choice Obinna would make. The night was quiet after that moment, but it wasn't peace, it was the silence of something dangerous, like the pause before a storm. The people who had gathered slowly drifted away, their whispers still carrying far into the compounds nearby. Inside Obinna's yard, only 3 figures remained: Obinna, Mema Efima, and Adiz. The air between them was heavy, filled with unspoken words, broken trust, and a kind of fear that comes when the ordinary turns into something unbearable. Obinna's hands were still on his mother, her body leaning into his as though she had no strength left to stand on her own. She didn't speak, only let her eyes glisten under the dim light of the single lamp swinging at the edge of their porch. Adiz stood at the far end, her arms crossed, her breath steady but her eyes sharp, like someone guarding a wound while keeping herself ready to strike again. Obinna slowly helped his mother to a wooden stool. She sank into it with a quiet sigh, her eyes never leaving her daughter-in-law. There was a story in those eyes, a mixture of sorrow, pain, and something older, something that had lived through years of trials. Obinna looked at his wife then, searching for something, an explanation, perhaps, but found only defiance. Adiz finally spoke, her voice cutting through the silence. I will not be looked down on in this house. She has been telling me I am worthless since the day I came here. I will not carry it anymore. Her words were sharp, but beneath them was a trembling, almost like a cry she refused to admit. Obinna's heart ached. He knew both women, knew the pride of his mother, but also the hurt in his wife's heart. Yet, he was frozen. The choice felt like a knife twisting inside him. His mother's breath came slower now, and he could feel her trembling, whether from the beating or from something deeper, something rooted in shame. He bent closer to her. Mother, are you hurt badly? His voice was soft, but there was something unsteady in it. Mema Ifema's eyes met his, and for the first time, she spoke. This is not about my hurt, son. This is about respect. She has crossed a line. Her voice was calm now, but the wound it carried was deep. Adiz stepped forward suddenly, her face flushed. Respect isn't given freely here. I have carried shame quietly for too long. I will not be humiliated in my own home. Her voice broke, and then steadied again, as though she had summoned courage from somewhere unseen. Obinna felt the walls of the compound closing in on him. Somewhere deep inside, he knew he was no longer just a husband or a son. He was now a man who would have to decide whose pain to honor. The air seemed heavier with each passing moment, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Mema Ifema got up slowly, leaning on Obinna for support. Adiz, you have no right to lay your hands on me. You married my son. You stepped into my home. This is my right, my place, and my voice. You cannot erase that. Her voice, though weak, was steady. There was no cry for mercy, only the truth she believed in. Adiz's lips tightened. And I have no right to live in a house where my dignity is destroyed every day. Her words hung in the air like smoke. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Obinna finally broke the silence, his voice low but firm. Stop. Both of you. I will not have this destroy what we have. His hands tightened into fists. Mother, Adiz, this is my home. You cannot fight like this inside it. Adiz looked at him, her chest rising and falling. Then decide, Obinna. Either she changes her ways or I leave. I will not stay where I am not respected. Mema Ifema's face hardened. And I will not leave. This is my home. This is my son. He will not turn against me. Obinna's mind was spinning. He looked between them, both women who mattered most to him, both standing in a way that made compromise feel impossible. His heart pounded, and for the first time, he feared he could lose them both. He stepped away, pacing. The sound of his footsteps echoed like the beat of a drum in the still night. Outside, the cicadas sang softly, the sound faint but persistent, as though the earth itself was watching. His wife and mother stood there, breathing heavily, each unwilling to back down. The air was thick with tension. It was no longer just a quarrel, it was a breaking point. Obinna finally stopped. He looked at both women, the weight of what he must do pressing down on him. His voice was low, almost a whisper. I will find a way to settle this. But not tonight. The words barely hung in the air before Adiz turned sharply, walking toward the gate. Mema Ifema watched her go without a word, her expression unreadable. Obinna was left standing in the middle, torn and silent, the quiet stretching between them like an unspoken promise that the battle was far from over. The night closed in on the yard. The lamplight flickered. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the sound felt like a warning. And somewhere deep in his heart, Obinna knew the choice he made next would change everything. The night passed quietly, but for Obinna it was not peace, it was a restless sleep filled with shadows of doubt and the weight of a decision he had yet to make. His bed felt cold, though the air outside was still warm. Every sound from the compound seemed louder in his mind, the creak of the door, the faint rustle of wind through the palm leaves, the distant hum of frogs somewhere near the river. He lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling, his thoughts turning in circles he could not escape. When morning came, it did not bring relief. The air was heavier now, as if the events of last night had seeped into the walls of the home. The compound was quiet, too quiet. Even the women who normally greeted him at the gate kept their distance. Obinna stepped outside, his feet sinking softly into the red earth. His mother sat on the porch in silence, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes fixed somewhere far away. There was no anger in her face now, only an old sadness that seemed deeper than the pain from the beating. Obinna approached her slowly. "Mother, I need to talk to you." Memar Ifema did not look at him. "We have nothing to talk about, son. You already know where I stand." Her words felt like a stone dropped into his chest. He stood there quietly for a moment before speaking again. "I need to know how we can move forward. This cannot keep going on like this." She finally looked at him, her eyes tired but steady. "It is not about moving forward. It is about respect. That is the foundation of any home. If she cannot give it to me, then there is no peace." Obinna nodded slowly, though her words only tangled the knot in his heart tighter. He turned to look toward the path leading away from the house, toward where Adiz had gone last night. She was sitting by the river, her knees drawn to her chest, staring at the water as if it could wash away the storm in her heart. When she saw him approach, her eyes did not soften. They were sharp, guarded, still carrying the fire from last night. "You came," she said quietly. "I needed to," Obinna replied. He stood before her, unsure whether to sit or to speak. "Adiz, last night." She cut him off. Don't speak of last night. Speak of what comes after. What will you do?" Her question was like a knife. Obinna looked away, watching the water ripple under the sun's rise. "I don't know," he admitted. "I can't lose either of you." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then you must choose. I will not live in a home where my worth is questioned. You must decide if you stand with me or with her." Obinna felt the weight of her words pressing down on him like stones. This was not just about a quarrel anymore, it was about the soul of his home, about his own heart. The air between them grew heavy, filled with things unsaid, promises unmade, and the sound of the river moving endlessly forward. When he returned to the house, the atmosphere had changed. Memar Ifema was standing at the porch, her face unreadable, her eyes fixed on the road beyond the compound. No one spoke. Obinna went inside and sat in silence, as if the walls themselves were waiting for him to decide. Later that afternoon, Adiz returned. Her face was pale, her steps slow, but there was still a certain defiance in her eyes. She did not greet his mother. She did not greet Obinna at once. She went straight to her room and closed the door behind her. Memar Ifema watched her go, then looked toward her son. "This will not end quietly," she said softly. "You must prepare for what comes next." Obinna did not answer. He sat on the porch, staring at nothing, his mind tangled between love, duty, and something that felt like fear. By evening, the air in the compound was thick again, as if the fight had not ended but only changed form. The neighbors whispered as they passed by, some glancing toward the house, others turning away. The children played quietly in the dust, their laughter dimmed. Obinna stepped into the small courtyard between the rooms, watching the shadows stretch long under the dying sun. The fight between his wife and mother was no longer just theirs, it was now a question that rippled through the whole village. People were watching, waiting. And somewhere in his chest, Obinna knew the choice he would make next would break or bind his life forever. The night fell slowly. A faint breeze carried the scent of river water and dry earth. Obinna sat at the edge of the porch, thinking about what peace could even mean now. Tomorrow, he knew, would not be another day like this. It would be a day when the walls of his home would finally speak. When the question of whose heart would stand would be answered. And somewhere, deep inside him, Obinna knew there was no turning back from what was coming. The next morning came slow and heavy, as if the whole village knew something was breaking inside Obinna's home. The air was different, quieter, but sharp in a way that made the skin tingle. Even the sounds of the village felt hushed. Somewhere far off, a rooster crowed, but it was a soft sound, almost like a warning. Inside the compound, Obinna woke before the sun. The wooden frame of his bed creaked slightly as he moved. His mind was restless, replaying every word from the night before. Mother or wife, neither would step aside. He felt as though he was standing at the center of a fire, and whatever choice he made would either burn him completely or leave him with scars he could never hide. He rose quietly and stepped outside. The earth under his bare feet was cool with dew. Mima Ifema was already there, sitting on the porch steps, her head bowed, her wrapper pulled close around her. Her breathing was steady, but her hands rested on her knees as though holding on to something unseen. Obinna sat beside her. "Mother," he said quietly, "we must speak." She did not look at him at first. Her voice came low, without urgency. "We have spoken. You know where I stand." He looked at her, his chest tightening. "But you also know this cannot go on without a breaking point. Adiz will not yield, and neither will you. This house will not survive unless we face this truth." Her eyes lifted to his then, sharp and steady. "The truth is simple. Respect is not negotiable." He stayed silent. Her words burned, but they were not the whole story. He knew Adiz's pain too, even if she carried it in a way that hurt others. From the kitchen came the sound of firewood cracking. Adiz appeared, carrying a small clay pot of water. Her eyes met his for a moment before sliding away toward the yard. She did not speak. Obinna felt her presence heavy, as if every breath she took was a word left unsaid. He rose slowly. "Adiz," he said. She looked at him, her face unreadable. "What do you want to say?" "I want to fix this. But I cannot if neither of you will move." She shifted the pot to rest it on the ground. "Fix this? You think this can be fixed with words? No. You have to choose." Her voice was calm but carried the weight of finality. Obinna swallowed hard. He could see the fight in her eyes, the stubbornness that had made last night's quarrel erupt. But he could also see something deeper, hurt he could not ignore. Mema Ifema stirred beside him. "Son, she must understand this is my home. If she cannot respect me, then she cannot live here. That is my truth." Obinna turned to his mother. "And if she cannot live here? Then what?" Her eyes narrowed. "Then she leaves." Adiz's laugh came, low and bitter. "And if I cannot live here because of her? Will you tell her to leave, Obinna?" The question hung between them like smoke. Obinna could not answer. The day passed slowly. No one in the compound spoke much. Obinna spent hours walking the small yard, his head bent low. Mima Ifema sat quietly, occasionally glancing toward him, while Adiz kept to her room, the door closed tight. The air felt thicker as the sun sank lower, spilling gold across the compound, turning the dust into something almost holy, almost dangerous. As the night came, Obinna found himself outside again. He walked toward the small path that led toward the river, the same path Adiz had taken the night before. The sound of water rushing over stones filled the air softly, and for a moment, he thought the river might hold an answer. Adiz was there again, sitting at the edge of the water, her knees pulled to her chest, eyes fixed on the moving surface. She did not look at him when he approached. "You come often," she said finally, without turning. "I needed to think," he replied. She stayed quiet for a moment. Then she said, "This is no longer about respect. This is about who will have power in this house. You cannot sit between us forever." Obinna looked at her. Her voice trembled slightly now. "Do you want me to choose?" "Yes," she said quietly, finally meeting his eyes. "You must choose." Obinna did not answer right away. He looked at her, then at the river. Somewhere in that silence, the world seemed to slow. The night felt deeper, heavier, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "I don't want to lose you both." Her eyes softened, but only for a moment before hardening again. Then decide, Obinna, before it is too late. He stayed by the river long after she had gone. The sound of the water seemed louder now, as though it was speaking to him. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the choice he faced was not just about his wife or his mother. It was about what kind of man he would become. That night, he slept little. His dreams were filled with voices, his mother's voice, Adi's voice, and his own voice calling him toward something he could not yet name. The morning would not come easy, and neither would his choice. The next morning arrived not with light, but with a weight that seemed to press down on the whole compound. The air was still, almost too still, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Inside the house, silence had settled like dust. No laughter, no voices, only the quiet sound of wind brushing against leaves. Obinna woke before dawn. He lay on his bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling. The night had been restless, his dreams haunted by the clash between Adi's voice and his mother's words. They both demanded something of him, something he was not sure he could give. His hand drifted to his chest, and he could feel the weight of both their hearts pressing down on his own. He stepped outside without speaking. The air was cool, wet with dew, the earth smelling of rain that had not fallen yet. Mima Ifema was already on the porch, wrapped in her old wrapper, her eyes staring toward the road that led away from the compound. Her breathing was steady, but her shoulders carried a tension that told him she had been awake for hours. "You are restless," she said without turning to look at him. "I am trying to find peace," he replied softly. She turned her head to him then, her eyes sharp. "There is no peace without truth." He nodded. "Then tell me the truth, mother. What is it you want from me?" She looked at him with an intensity that made his skin tighten. "I want this house to remain mine. I want respect. I want to know my son will stand with me when the walls of this home are tested." Her words landed heavy in his chest. He did not answer right away. Instead, he turned toward the yard, where the earth was wet and dark under the morning light. Somewhere, far away, a child's laughter broke the silence, quick, bright, and somehow cruel in its innocence. Later that morning, Adiz stepped outside. Her face was pale, her eyes carrying the same quiet fire he had seen the night before. She walked slowly toward the courtyard, her steps deliberate. She did not look at his mother or speak. She carried with her a small bundle wrapped in cloth, holding it close as though it was fragile. Obinna watched her, unsettled by the air between them. She stopped before him. "We need to talk," she said quietly. He followed her to the edge of the yard, where the grass was still wet. "I thought you wanted me to choose," he said softly. "I still do," she replied. "But I want to tell you something before you make that choice." Her voice was low, but her eyes were fixed on his. "You think this is about respect, but it is not. This is about survival. Do you know what it feels like to walk every day in a house where you are never safe? Where every step feels like walking on thin glass?" Obinna did not answer. He could feel her words sinking into him, pulling him deeper into a storm he could not escape. She looked away toward the path that led to the river. "Last night, when I left this house, I thought about walking away forever. But then I thought of you. I thought of us. And I realized I cannot give up without a fight." Her words were heavy, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The air around them seemed to thicken with unsaid things. Obinna reached out but stopped before touching her arm. "Adiz, She cut him off. "Don't. Let me finish. I do not want to fight my husband's mother. I want to fight for my place. For my home. But if that place cannot exist here, then I must find it elsewhere." Her eyes glistened with something like sorrow, or perhaps defiance. She turned away and walked toward her room, leaving Obinna standing in the wet grass, the bundle in her hands swaying slightly with each step. Mima Ifema came down the porch steps quietly, her eyes fixed on Obinna. "She spoke to you," she said softly. "And she is dangerous." Obinna did not reply. His mind was already turning, pulling him into thoughts he could not escape. The day passed slowly. In the afternoon, the village seemed quieter than usual, as though everyone had felt the tension radiating from his home. People passed by, lowering their voices when they spoke. Even the children kept their distance, watching from afar. When the evening came, Obinna found himself alone on the porch. The sky was painted in deep shades of red and gold, but it felt cold to him, as though the colors themselves could not warm what was breaking inside. He sat there for hours, watching shadows stretch across the earth. Somewhere in the quiet of the night, he heard the faint sound of footsteps. It was Adiz, carrying the bundle she had held that morning. She stopped before him, her face unreadable. "I cannot keep walking away," she said quietly. "But I cannot stay in a house that asks me to choose between him and peace." Obinna looked at her, torn between the pull of his mother's words and the fire in her eyes. He did not speak. She placed the bundle gently at his feet. "Think about what you will do. Because soon, this will not be just about us. It will be about who controls the heart of this home." And with that, she walked away, leaving him alone in the deep night, the bundle heavy at his feet and the sound of her steps fading into silence. The air felt different now, thick with something that was no longer just conflict. It was the beginning of something much larger, something that would test not just Obinna's heart, but the soul of everything he had built. The night felt endless. The air around the compound was heavy, as though it had taken on the weight of every word left unsaid between them. Obinna stayed where he was, seated by the doorway, the bundle Adiz left still resting beside him. The moonlight spilled faint silver across the yard, but it felt cold, more like a witness than comfort. His mind moved in circles, replaying her words, his mother's words, the quiet plea buried beneath both. The bundle seemed to pull at him, not just with its weight but with something intangible, a silent urgency. Slowly, he reached down and opened it. Inside lay a piece of cloth, folded neatly, and something wrapped within it. His fingers hesitated, then lifted the cloth to reveal a small bundle of herbs, roots, and a few torn pieces of paper with words written in careful, flowing handwriting. Obinna did not recognize all of it, but one thing was clear: this was not just a bundle of herbs. It was a message, something from Adiz's heart, something she could not speak aloud. He held it in his hand, the paper trembling slightly. Somewhere behind him, the sound of the compound stirred. Mema Ifema stepped out, drawn perhaps by the quiet sound of movement. Her eyes found the bundle, then his hand. "What is that?" she asked sharply, stepping closer. "It's from Adiz," he said softly. "She left it for me." She took it from him without asking, unfolding the cloth carefully. Her face hardened as her eyes fell on the herbs and the writing. She read the papers quickly, then looked up at him with a sharp edge in her voice. "This is not just a gift. This is a calling. She is asking you to choose not with your mouth but with your heart." Obinna's chest tightened. "What does she want me to choose?" Mema Ifema folded the cloth back, her movements slow, deliberate. "She wants you to decide if this house belongs to her or to me. She is not asking for peace. She is asking for victory." The words hung in the air. Outside, the night deepened, the sounds of the village fading to whispers. Somewhere far off, an animal cried softly, the sound raw and aching. Obinna rose and stepped toward the yard, the bundle still in his hand. The path ahead felt heavy. The compound, which once felt like a place of shelter, now felt like a battleground. He knew tomorrow could not be like today. The tension was no longer just a storm inside the walls of his home, it had become a storm inside him. The next day began without ceremony. The sky was pale, the sun hidden by heavy clouds that threatened rain. Obinna did not speak much. He moved quietly, as if walking through shadows. He found Adiz in her room, sitting with her legs crossed, the small bundle gone. Her eyes lifted when he entered, but she did not smile. "I have something to say," he began, his voice low. She nodded, still quiet. "I found the bundle you left. I understand now it is more than just herbs and words. It is your voice, asking me to choose." Her gaze softened for a moment. Then you understand what is at stake. I do, he said, taking a deep breath. But I cannot choose without hearing your truth. Tell me why you fight so hard. Tell me why you refuse to step away. Adi's eyes held his for long moments. Then she spoke softly, almost as if speaking to herself. Because I have never had a place where I truly belong. I came to this house hoping for love. But I found war. I do not want to win over your mother. I want to win you. But in this house, they have told me I cannot have both. Her words cut through him. He could hear her heart in them, a quiet, desperate beat that trembled beneath her voice. I do not want war either, he said quietly. But if I cannot stop it, I must decide where I stand. She nodded slowly. Then decide, Obinna. Because the walls of this house cannot hold both of us anymore. Outside, the clouds gathered heavy. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled low. It was the sound of a storm that was coming not just from the sky, but from the very heart of the home. The rest of the day passed without conversation. Obinna moved between rooms, speaking little. Mima Ifema kept to her place on the porch, her eyes never leaving him. Adiz stayed in her room, the door closed tight. The compound felt like a wound that would not heal, and Obinna knew the choice he faced was coming closer with every passing hour. By nightfall, the sky was black with rain clouds, and a wind had begun to blow. Obinna stood outside, watching the trees bend under its force. Somewhere, a single drop of rain fell, then another, until the air was filled with the sound of water breaking against earth. Adiz stepped out quietly. Her hair was damp, her clothes sticking to her skin. She walked toward him without a word. He looked at her, the storm between them heavier than the one in the sky. Have you decided? He asked softly. She shook her head. No. But I know what I want. And that is enough to change everything. Her words left him speechless. She stepped closer, rain falling over them both, the world around them dissolving into the sound of the storm. For a moment, there was nothing but the two of them, standing in the rain, each carrying battles they could not yet name. The night came on stronger. Thunder rolled nearer, the rain falling in steady sheets. Somewhere, deep in the storm, Obinna knew that when morning came, the choice would no longer be his alone. The storm was coming for them all. The dawn came slowly, like a reluctant witness. The storm of the night had left the air damp and heavy. The compound was quiet except for the occasional drip of water from the roof, the sound like a soft pulse in the stillness. The earth was dark and glistened with rain, and the smell of wet clay filled the air. Obinna woke before sunrise. His body felt drained, his mind still tangled in the storm from last night. He did not move immediately. He lay there, listening. Somewhere beyond the walls of the compound, the village was stirring. There was the sound of footsteps, voices murmuring softly, and the faint creak of doors opening. But within the house, there was nothing, no sound, no movement, only silence heavy enough to breathe. He rose slowly and stepped outside. The courtyard was wet, the puddles reflecting pale light that filtered through clouds. Mima Ifema sat at the edge of the porch, her wrapper pulled tightly around her shoulders. She did not speak when he approached. She just stared into the distance, as though watching something beyond sight. Obinna stood beside her, shoulders stiff. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Mima Ifema broke the silence. You have to choose today. Her voice was soft but firm. This house will not hold itself together if you keep standing in the middle. Obinna said nothing. He knew she was right. But what she did not know was how deeply torn he was. Adiz stepped out then, her hair still damp from the night rain. Her eyes were fixed on him, steady and unflinching. In her hands, she carried another small bundle, wrapped in cloth. She stopped a few steps away, not close enough to speak without raising her voice, but close enough for him to feel the pull between them. I brought this for you, she said softly. Not as a choice, but as truth. Obinna moved toward her, but Mama Ifema's voice stopped him. Do not take it, she said sharply. Whatever is inside will only bind you to her side. Adise looked at Mama Efima with quiet defiance. It is not a binding, it is an opening. A way to see what lies ahead. Obinna took the bundle slowly. Inside were more herbs, pieces of folded cloth, and another piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully. The writing was different from before, jagged, hurried, desperate. The words spoke of promises, of sacrifices, of a life built on love or lost to silence. His heart pounded. He looked up at Adise. "What is this?" "It is what I could not say aloud," she said. "It is my voice, Obinna. My truth. I want you to read it, and then choose not for me, not for her, but for yourself." Obinna's hand trembled as he read the paper. Each word seemed to carve into him, pulling him deeper into her world, and yet deeper into the war between them. Mama Efima's eyes never left him. "Once you read that, you cannot turn back," she said. "You will have made your choice." Obinna folded the paper slowly. His mind was a storm, his heart pulled in two directions. He could feel the weight of both women pressing on him, the pull of his own desire for peace tearing against the need to protect his home. The morning stretched on. The village outside moved forward, but inside the compound, time felt still. They sat together without speaking, Obinna holding the bundle, Adise waiting quietly, Mama Efima staring ahead as if she were ready for whatever was coming. Finally, Obinna stood. His voice was low, firm. "I will go to the river." Both women turned toward him. Mama Efima frowned, but Adise's eyes softened. "Why?" she asked. "To think. To decide. Alone." He stepped away from them, crossing the wet yard toward the path that led to the river. Rain began again, light at first, then heavier, the drops falling against him like the beat of a drum. He did not stop. The river was swollen from the storm, its surface restless and dark. He stood at the edge, feeling the water tug at his feet. The sound of the current filled his ears, and for the first time in days, his mind was quiet. He took the bundle Adise gave him and set it gently on a rock. The cloth felt heavy, filled not just with herbs but with a weight that was almost sacred. He opened it again and let his eyes fall on the words she had written. The words spoke of love that defied fear, of strength that came from sacrifice, of a home built not on possession but on choice. He read them again and again, the river carrying away the sound of his breath. Behind him, the sound of footsteps made him turn. Both women were there now, Mama Efima standing at the edge of the trees, her face unreadable, and Adise closer, her wet hair clinging to her face, her eyes fixed on him. "This is the moment," Adise said softly. "You cannot delay it anymore." Obinna closed the cloth. He looked between them, his heart heavy, torn. "I know," he said quietly. "But the choice is not mine alone anymore." Mama Efima stepped forward then, her voice calm but certain. "You must decide, Obinna. For this house, for your life." Adise moved closer too, her hand brushing his arm. "Choose for us, Obinna. Choose for yourself." The rain fell harder, the river roared louder, and the world seemed to hold its breath. In that moment, Obinna felt the weight of generations pressing down on him, the weight of love, of anger, of pride, and of survival. He closed his eyes. The voices around him faded, replaced by the rush of the river. Somewhere deep inside, he knew what his answer would be. When he opened his eyes, the storm was not behind him anymore. It was inside him. And whatever choice he made now would change everything. The river moved on, relentless and deep, carrying with it the story that had begun with a clash, a cry, and a promise. The story of love, of loss, and of a decision that no man could take lightly. This story is more than just a tale, it is a journey through love, conflict, and the choices that shape our lives. Every word, every moment, is a reminder that our hearts and homes are bound together in ways we cannot ignore. Thank you for walking through this story with us. If this touched you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a new episode. We'd also love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments the country you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your voice keeps this story alive.